Hi there, I'm Tracy Smith, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. It's been 50 years since The Godfather premiered in 1972. Hard to imagine that quotable classic almost never got made.
Why do you come out here in the rain, the weight like this?
To catch cold, and if I have chance to see Marlon Brando.
The Godfather broke all box office records at the time. Not bad for a film made by a director who, at first, didn't even want to make it. Back then, Francis Ford Coppola was a young filmmaker in business with another young gun, George Lucas. But when Coppola first read Mario Puzo's book, The Godfather, he was underwhelmed.
And I thought, this is just sort of salacious, trying to make money kind of book. And so I disregarded it. When they offered it to me, I turned it down.
What changed your mind?
George Lucas came to me and says, Francis, we're going broke. They're going to chain the door for the lack of paying the rent of our American Zoetrope studio. And you have to do this. We have no other alternative. We need the money.
There's more from my chat with famed director Francis Ford Coppola coming up a little later in the show. When did you feel in your heart of hearts that it was a success?
In those days, for a movie, if it could do $35 million or $40 million, that would be good. So they were, I was in the office and Ruddy was there. In fact, I'm honest about when he is there. And they were all talking about it was conceivable that it could do $75 million, which was science fiction. So I said to them, like a typical wheeler dealer that I was, said, you know, you guys always pick me up in a station wagon. I was the fifth person. I would ride to the work with the station wagon with the 5 other crew members. If it does $100 million, I want you to buy me a Mercedes 600 limousine. And they said, Francis, if this does $100 million, you can have a Mercedes limousine. And when it did it, I went with George Lucas in a little Honda 500 to the Mercedes place. And we said, we want that limousine. They wouldn't even talk to us. They thought we were two hippies. And I said, send the bill to Paramount Pictures. And they did, and they paid for it.
Then Faith Salie with some of the most impressive rock stars on the planet.
Is this the room that people flock to? Because this is like the superstars of mineral.
It's always been the most popular place in this group of halls. For sure, it's dazzling. You know, it's bling bling. So if we put a light on there, we can make the star move.
Do you always carry a flashlight?
When I'm down here, I do.
In fact, Harlow recommends that you BYOF, bring your own flashlight.
Star rubies are quite rare, and so it does the same thing, right? It does the same thing with we change the light orientation, we get a moving star.
It's like it's alive.
Yeah, it is alive.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. The Godfather has become a cultural touchstone. It seems as if all the stars must have aligned to make it happen. But behind the scenes, the film was actually fraught with power struggles and second-guessing. I sat down with some of the cast and director Francis Ford Coppola to get the inside story of how the masterpiece got made.
I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's gonna give you what you want.
It's too late. They start shooting in a week.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
You probably remember the first time you saw The Godfather, and by now you can likely recite all the characters' best lines. From Clemenza's cannolis.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
To Sonny's bada bing.
You gotta get up close like this. Bada bing! You blow their brains all over your nice Ivy League suit.
The film came out half a century ago, in March 1972. And when it did, the real mob was at the theater.
Why do you come out here in the rain, the weight like this?
To catch cold, and if I have chance to see Marlon Brando.
The Godfather broke all box office records at the time. Not bad for a film made by a director who, at first, didn't even want to make it. Back then, Francis Ford Coppola was a young filmmaker in business with another young gun, George Lucas. But when Coppola first read Mario Puzo's book, The Godfather, he was underwhelmed.
And I thought, this is just sort of salacious, trying to make money kind of book. And so I disregarded it. When they offered it to me, I turned it down.
What changed your mind?
George Lucas came to me and says, Francis, we're going broke. They're going to chain the door for lack of paying the rent of our American Zoetrope studio. And you have to do this. We have no other alternative. We need the money.
So Coppola took the job, framing it as a dark tale of family succession, and almost immediately began to butt heads with Paramount studio brass.
I was very young. I was 29. I had no power. They could easily push me around, which they did and tried to.
Coppola wanted New York stage actor Al Pacino to play Michael. The studio wanted anyone but, and considered people like Robert Redford, Ryan O'Neal, and Warren Beatty. They also wanted Sir Laurence Olivier in the title role, but Coppola held out for Marlon Brando. At 46 and in top physical shape, Brando didn't look anything like an aging Don.
That I cannot do.
But with some world-class makeup, he was able to transform himself into a character he knew just how to play.
We've known each other many years, but this is the first time you ever came to me for counsel, for help.
The cat was Coppola's idea.
It was a studio cat, and I just put it in his hand. He would never say, what do you want me to do? I joked that, like, if he's in a scene, Brando was in a scene, and a herd of buffalo ran by in character, he would say, oh, look at the buffalo. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He would make use of anything. Yeah. He was great. He was a genius, no doubt about it.
And now you've had your drink.
And talk about genius. Robert Duvall, as family attorney Tom Hagen, did this scene in 2 takes.
They shot Sonny on the causeway. He's dead.
As always, Duvall had his lines down cold. Brando probably didn't.
He didn't like to memorize lines?
Yeah, well, he claimed that by seeing the lines, he could be fresher. I think it was a form of laziness. I mean, in the scene with Pacino out in the backyard, he had a great big sign in a tree. He'd look up at the tree and say the lines from off the tree way up, you know.
That's wild, but it just looks like he's thinking.
Yeah, well, you know, he was able to do that.
But even with all that talent, Coppola was in constant fear of losing his job. The studio hated his ideas, and some of the crew, he says, would badmouth him behind his back.
This one. All these people here, and you look so alone.
Well, that's really, this picture is how I felt during the picture. I was not a happy camper, as they say.
Coppola wasn't totally alone. He'd cast 2 allies as Corleone's siblings, James Caan as Sonny, and his real-life sister, Talia Shire, as Connie. But they feared the worst.
For those first couple of weeks that we were all shooting, Francis's job was in jeopardy.
Yeah.
I mean, and so my sister shouldn't have been on that set, I will tell you that, because it was very, very tough.
But a turning point came after Paramount execs saw the dailies for this scene, where Al Pacino, as Michael, prepares to kill 2 of his family's mortal enemies. The sound of the train helps build tension that you can feel and see behind Pacino's eyes until the moment he strikes. But for all the shoot-'em-up, some at Paramount worried that The Godfather as scripted wasn't violent enough. Coppola says they actually wanted to hire someone to pump up the action in the film, so he choreographed the violent fight scene between Talia Shire's character Connie and her no-good husband Carlo, played by Gianni Russo.
And I remember the plates were heavy, so I'd go, and it wouldn't break, and it didn't break. And so my shoes came off, and I kept just running around in the broken things because you don't want to take 2. But it was intense.
Talk about intense. For the scene where Sonny is gunned down at the toll booth, technicians wired everything with small explosive charges called squibs to simulate bullet strikes.
On me, I had 147. Around the toll booth, it was 5,000.
Oh, Jesus. Were you scared?
A little, but there were girls on the set, and I had to do it. I swear I wish I was lying.
The result was a shockingly realistic ballet of brutality that looked lethal and actually could have been.
It would blow a hole in your hand if you put your hand right here like that.
You can't do it many times,
You don't
right?
want to take two. That's a
Take two.
No, take two
Are
with
you
that.
crazy?
No, you're still like an older brother. Like, did you notice that? Madon.
And the winner is Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather.
The first Godfather movie won 3 Oscars, but it was bigger than that.
You come here unannounced on the day my daughter is to be married.
It changed our culture in ways that still resonate today, from The Simpsons to The Sopranos.
Is it true, Michael?
No. But even if you've seen it 100 times, you haven't seen it like this for a while. The studio restored The Godfather in time for the anniversary, so now it once again looks like the vision Francis Ford Coppola went through a kind of hell to make.
I would imagine that the wounds have healed by now.
I don't know, the wounds really, I mean, do you have some episode in your life when you were a young woman that hurt you and you think about it, does it not hurt you anymore?
No, you're right, it still hurts. It still
because,
hurts?
Because we are creatures of feelings and those feelings get linked with something, and if you go back and think on that subject, it can break your heart again.
Coppola, of course, went on to be recognized as one of the greatest directors of all time, and he told us that ultimately he's glad he took the job. Aren't we all?
The Godfather was a new way to show an Italian-American gangster film with a different sensibility. So of course, always the movie you do that is something a little different is rejected in its own time, but years later it becomes the new. Now then Godfather becomes the standard to measure against. In other words, art is a ever-blossoming flower that we're all part of. It's a beautiful thing, really.
More from my chat with Francis Ford Coppola in just a few minutes. But up next, a sparkling, dazzling display brought to you by Mother Nature. A 563-carat sapphire and a 12,000-pound geode are just a few of the stars of our next story. Faith Saley takes us inside the Museum of Natural History in New York City, where a popular display has reopened, billions of years in the making.
Downstairs from the T-Rex and just past the giant whale, there are some rock stars waiting at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
People get in here and they're agog for obvious reasons.
Ellen Futter is president of the museum, where the newly reopened Mignone Halls of Gems and Minerals invite visitors to find wonder set in stone.
They go over to that geode, all 13 feet of it, and they go, wow.
How does it get that sparkle?
Indeed, this 12,000-pound geode, one of the largest on the planet, comes from the Earth, but looks out of this world.
So this is the Amethyst Galaxy.
George Harlow is the curator of the gallery, which has been closed for renovations and redesign since 2017.
The crystals formed relatively quickly, probably in a matter of tens or hundreds of years. To change the color of the crystals that were there once colorless, and now they're this purple color, that took millions and millions of years.
Millions of years is a blink of an eye in geology. When you're talking minerals, you're talking billions of years, like all the way back to the beginning.
So after the Big Bang, big stars had blown up and there was the soup of elements necessary to start making minerals had occurred, and one of the first ones to form was diamond. Diamonds were one of the first minerals to occur in the universe.
14 billion years later, there are over 5,000 minerals on Earth, 10 times as many as anywhere else in the solar system. We're a lucky, shiny planet, especially when you gaze upon our gems. A gem is, simply put, a mineral that's been polished and cut for an adoring audience.
Is this the room that people flock to? Because this is like the superstars of minerals.
It's always been the most popular place in this group of halls. For sure, it's dazzling, you know, it's bling bling.
That bling bling attracted some thieves to the old hall back in 1964 in an infamous heist led by a Florida man named Jack Murphy.
I am an avid museum goer.
The media nicknamed him Murph the Surf and marveled at how he and his cronies managed to steal the precious Star of India. The 563-carat sapphire is now safely back in a sealed case, enthralling visitors.
So if we put a light on there, we can make the star move.
Do you always carry a flashlight?
When I'm down here, I do.
In fact, Harlow recommends that you BYOF, bring your own flashlight.
Star rubies are quite rare, and so it does the same thing, right? It does the same thing with we change the light orientation. We get a moving star.
It's like it's alive.
Yeah, it is alive with respect to light.
Most minerals never see the light of day. The bulk here were mined from all over the world, though this rare uncut 9-pound garnet was found just blocks away from the museum in a not-so-exotic sewer excavation. Due to some clever New York marketing, it's been dubbed the subway garnet.
This is really a sewer garnet.
So it's, yeah, but that's not very euphonious, you know?
No.
And while these gems, jewels, and crystals dazzle our eyes, one can even sing to our ears.
The story was that when it was first put on display in the museum, this was before there was air conditioning. And when there was change in the weather, people could hear this little squeaky sounds coming out of the block.
Whether hidden inside the earth or covering our beaches, whose white sand is most likely made of quartz, minerals are everywhere and in everything. Lithium for batteries, clay for kitty litter. Ice is a mineral, and minerals make up our bones and teeth.
Salt is a mineral. If you take a magnifying glass and you look at the salt coming out of your salt shaker, you'll see that they're little cubes.
The table salt that we use, that stuff is millions of years old?
In most cases, yes.
We can sprinkle minerals on our food and on our bodies. But for Harlow, it's not the sparkle of the specimens, but the oohs and ahs of the visitors that give the gallery its meaning.
My sense of the success of the Gem Hall is when I see nose prints on the glass, or as I say, slobber marks. That's success.
Beautiful.
I just got by and got it. That scene almost was not in the movie.
Want to know which famous scene almost never made it into The Godfather? We'll tell you after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Once again, here's Francis Ford Coppola on the making of The Godfather.
When we look at that movie, it's rewarding to watch it, and you think, oh, the person behind all of this must have so enjoyed the experience. No.
No, I was always frightened. I had a wife, I had little kids, I had no money, and there was always rumors floating around that they didn't like the footage, they didn't like the stuff, and that this weekend you're going to get fired. You know, like I was very insecure, and you know, even like the famous scene, there was a scene that was cut out of the script that I wanted to keep. And so what I did is during the wedding scene, the famous Godfather wedding, I set up a little tomato patch, and I wanted to like get 15 minutes early so I could go and shoot the scene that was cut out of the script, which was the Godfather playing with his grandson in the tomato patch. And I was starting to do it with 2 cameras, and my minder, the guy who was my nemesis, said, you can't shoot this. This is cut out of the script. I said, you know, it's 10 minutes. Let me just get the shot. 2 cameras. He said, no, you can't. And he went off to make a phone call to get me cut off. And I rolled the camera, and Brando saw I was under trouble. He says, let me show you. And I'll do something I do with my kids. He loved kids, Brando. And he took the orange peel and put it in his mouth and scared the little kid. And the little kid was scared and ran away. And the guy came back and says, that's it, wrap. You know, so I just got by and got it. That scene almost was not in the movie.
It was that under the wire.
Yeah, oh yeah. And if you ask people the 5 favorite scenes in The Godfather, that's one of them. Isn't that interesting?
If this was so painful throughout, what kept you going?
Well, one of my choices. You know, I have a wonderful. I love my kids. I love my wife, and I had no money, and I had obligations.
Why not roll over for the studio? You get what I'm saying? Like there were times when you could have said, "Nah, I'll just do what they're telling me to do."
There's something in me can't do that. As to this day, because let's face it, what happened after this? I made The Godfather. And of course, after that, they were on me. Charlie, you have the formula of Coca-Cola, he said. Make another Godfather, you can make more Godfather. Tell you what, Francis, I'll give you anything you want. Tell me what you want. Finally, I said, all right, Charlie, I want $1 million. And I want Ruddy and Evans, none of them to have any. They can't read the script, they can't be on it. I'm going to produce it myself. And I want to call it The Godfather Part 2, which has never been done before. Never in Russia, there was Ivan the Terrible Part 2, but never in America. There was always son of the Godfather. So I get a call back. It's okay, you can have the $1 million. No Ruddy, no Evans, no anybody. It's just you. You're the only name on it. You'll be the only boss as you want. But we can't call it The Godfather Part 2. I said, why not? He said, because marketing says that all the audience will think it's the second half of the film they already saw. I said, okay, forget it then. I won't do it. And then they said, okay, Part 2. So then that's how, I tell you, Godfather Part 2, which was a very expensive, long, complicated movie. It had parts in Tahoe, in Las Vegas, in Cuba, in old New York in the 20s. Plus I did something really far out, which is I cast a new actor, Bobby De Niro, to play young Marlon Brando, and that was, even me now, so what a daring, I mean, imagine having Marlon Brando and casting a different actor to play a big part of him as a young guy, and he pulled it off.
Right, he did.
And it's called Part 2, and of course now every movie in, Dune 2 and Spider-Man 16, and I did that. I should be shot for doing that. I really should be.
When did you feel in your heart of hearts that it was a success?
In those days, for a movie, if it could do $35 million or $40 million, that would be good. So I was in the office, and Ruddy was there. In fact, I'm honest about when he is there. And they were all talking about it was conceivable that it could do $75 million, which was science fiction. So I said to them, like a typical wheeler dealer that I was, I said, you guys always pick me up in a station wagon. I was the 5th person. I would ride to work with the station wagon with the 5 other crew members. If it does $100 million, I want you to buy me a Mercedes 600 limousine. And they said, Francis, if this does $100 million, you can have a Mercedes limousine. And when it did it, I went with George Lucas in a little Honda 500 to the Mercedes place, and we said, we want that limousine. They wouldn't even talk to us. They thought we were two hippies. And I said, send the bill to Paramount Pictures. And they did, and they paid for it.
So what does The Godfather mean to you personally?
What does it mean? Boy, I know it changed my life. I mean, it sort of defined my life. I don't know that the trajectory I went on after the success of The Godfather, I would have gone on. I wouldn't, I don't know what would have happened. But I'll tell you one thing, after I finished all those successful Godfather movies, I made 2 of them, and I made The Conversation. I won a ton of Oscars. That when the next movie I wanted to make, when I was probably the hottest director in Hollywood, which was Apocalypse Now, nobody wanted to make. And I own Apocalypse Now, but you know why I own it? Because nobody wanted it.
Nobody wanted it.
Nobody wanted it, and I wanted to make it. And they all said, look, well, in other words, you are always running across the grain. Apocalypse Now still is being seen. So I own the negative of it. So it's like buying an apartment building, and the apartment building, the neighborhoods change, and then no one wants to rent it. But it's like buying an apartment building that for 60, 50, 67 years is always filled. That's what these movies are like. They meet the test of time. That's the most important critic of cinema, is time.
I'm Tracy Smith. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.